Okay, let's start. Can everyone hear me? Great, thank you. Well, I really appreciate you folks showing up at 5 o'clock. I know it's tempting, but we're certainly going to try our best to make it worth your while. So the topic for today is building tenant-wide apps with new Exchange REST APIs. And really, the good news here is we're going to actually give you a lot more than that. We have been investing heavily in the REST APIs, and you're going to see all the power available, what's coming down the line, what's the cool things about it, and also a question I get all the time about how does this compare to EWS, which is Exchange Web Services, ActiveSync, like what should I be thinking about? So let's get started. There are two of us. There's me and my colleague Shri, and she will also join me in the presentation. So to begin with the objectives, I think a lot of you are really familiar with Exchange Web Services. You've heard about Exchange ActiveSync. So what are these REST APIs? So I want to give you a sense of, why what is the story behind the REST APIs, and kind of not just an Office 365 wide effort, but a Microsoft wide effort to offer an API surface which at least looks and feels the same in terms of auth and the API shape. And in fact, our long-term goal, I'll talk a little bit about that, is to in fact have a converged endpoint for Office 365 and some of the other related workloads to begin with, and hopefully take that much further. So why REST APIs are important, a deep dive into the APIs, a lot of this, we're actually going to show you the raw request response. It's very easy then to see what you get back and to spur ideas of what kind of apps and what you can do with them, some best practices, also the comparison, like I said, with Exchange Web Services. And we have a really long roadmap and pretty big engineering investment going on, so I want to give you a sense of what else is coming down the line. If there's three things I want you to take away from the talk today, it's number one, even today in Office 365, you can build end-to-end scenarios using these REST APIs, and our goal is to, our mantra is basically that the developer or you, for your company or for the marketplace are able to build an app and then take it everywhere. And so which means Office 365, Outlook.com, Exchange on-premises, Exchange hybrid. Of course, there's a certain sequencing there as to when these light up, and I can tell you a little bit about that. So you can create end-to-end scenarios with them. They're pretty easy to learn and develop, and that's the consistent feedback we get, that they're very easy, and it doesn't matter what platform you use to develop, where this thing is running. It's pretty easy to use. And also, like I said, we're trying to make it the API where there's a lot of push behind that, and it's not just Exchange specific. That's a general Microsoft goal today, to kind of really embrace the REST API world and offer more and more power and ease of programming for those of you who want to build apps on it. So I'll go through a quick overview section. So when we look at the APIs, when we offer APIs, here's a few things we learned. One is in the IT industry or in all these companies, right? A lot of users are coming in and they want choices, right? There's the stock set of applications Microsoft offers which work well, but people want all different ways which suit their own unique needs to access the information which is being stored in Office 365. They want their own kind of unique pivot, something which really meets their needs. And for that to happen, you need to have a large set of developers out there, be able to be motivated to go actually offer applications which offer that view on top of the data. So that's number one. Number two, at the same time, while these people are, while they're accessing this information, which is corporate company-owned information using all these different apps, the people in charge of protecting the data want to know that the way it's being done is being in a fairly safe and auditable way, so that we have some sense of control over it, and that there's some accountability. It's not just users entering their username and password and giving away their complete privilege to some app, right? So that's the second thing. And the third is whether it's somebody trying to build, often when you're looking for somebody to staff your corporate internally, your development teams within a company, or even in any startup or a large software development company, we see that too. One of the key things is, for the apps or the technologies you want to use, how easy is it to find people in the market, right? So it's really important, therefore, that these APIs which we offer, so you can build solutions, you can easily find somebody who knows actually how to go build on top of them, and that you don't need to put them through like a massive training schedule just to get them productive. And so that's important as well. And fourth, the heterogeneity of where these applications run is huge within a company, and companies also want to develop one application sometimes and they want to try and have it show up in all different operating systems. So there's a lot of these factors. So what we have done is we've said, okay, we want to create a huge motivation for developers, and one way to do it is give them access through one set of APIs to the Office 365 user base. And in some cases, for example, meeting reminder type situations or task reminder type things, give them access to Outlook.com. So the goal here for us is going to be that this one set of APIs and one endpoint, an app can talk to it and service both set of users. And the benefit to all our business users is that because of the larger target market they can go after, that there'll be more and more choices for you and your for other users in your company. And then hybrid and on-premises exchange, a lot of our customers, we have a huge on-premise base even today. And so the goal is for those and for hybrid, how do we make sure that those same apps, they can take advantage of them as well. Engaged users, I think the developers want engaged users so they can see, they can get a lot of traction. There's a lot of power in the API, and then I spoke a little bit of the security aspect. I think it's important to make sure that the auth which is used, auth model which is used, that users are not just giving away their username and password to the app, that they actually have a way to authorize the app to access a certain amount of data, and we know exactly what data they're authorizing for, and that's something which can be audited and revoked if necessary. And based on open standards. So these APIs I'm going to talk about, they use OAuth, which is very standard these days for authorization. JSON, again, very popular. And OData is a protocol. It's a protocol which is one way to restify the API. The benefit of that is going to be that if you start developing apps against multiple workloads, Azure Active Directory, SharePoint, Exchange, you will start to see that the semantics for how you retrieve a collection of entities, an entity, or you start doing filtering or selecting properties, it's all consistent. So the benefit to you is going to be that the consistency. So it's very easy to, once you start building with one set of APIs, it's very easy to ramp up with the others. So what are the REST APIs we offer under this Office 365 umbrella? There's Azure Active Directory, Exchange and Outlook.com, which is going to be the bulk of the talk today, SharePoint, and OneDrive. So all of these, and in fact, one of the things we just launched into public preview, we'll go over a little bit of it, is a endpoint called the Office 365 Unified API, which is one layer so that an app can make a call to it and request for information and not even worry about where this information resides. That layer will proxy the request through, and then you have just one token and you can talk to all these workloads. And let me touch a little bit about the OAuth framework we're using. It's called Common Consent, and we call it Common Consent because if you as an app decide that you need to pull some information which is mail, calendar, contacts which reside in Exchange, and a little bit of the files information which resides in OneDrive for Business, we don't want to prompt the user multiple times to get their permissions, right? Similarly, you may want to go to Active Directory and take advantage of single sign-on. So we present one form which you see on the right-hand side, and all the permissions this app is going to use is listed there. And there's and then once the user consents, the consent is recorded. Now there are certain class of permissions which are deemed sensitive, in which case only an admin can consent. And if there's an app being deployed org-wide, there's also a way for the admin to consent to the app on behalf of all the users. The users may still have to access the install the app, but they will not see the consent screen at all. So that's one less thing you have to answer questions about. There's no. I think I touched a little bit about this. The OAuth, the fact that there's fine-grained scopes, and we'll show you what those are. You can even see here. There's like mail access, read, write, calendar, etc. And for the app, number one, if let's say your policy is to have multi-factor auth, the nice thing here is at the time when the app authenticates the user, Azure Active Directory steps in, which means that if you've already set it up to do phone factor auth, well, the phone factor auth is going to happen for the app as well. And neither the app developer nor the service workload has to worry about it. And for the app developer, they would hate to keep going back and prompting the users to log in and again and again. But at the same time, when the app gets a token, we want to make sure that even if the token is compromised, the exposure is limited. And the way we do it is the app acquires something called an access token from the service, from Azure Active Directory. The lifetime of the token is only 1 hour. However, the app also gets a refresh token, which is I think which is valid for 90 days as long as you continue to use it to get new access tokens. So the app can keep going back to Azure Active Directory and present the refresh token to get new access tokens. And what that pattern means is an access token gives the app privilege for 1 hour, and at least once an hour it has to come back and check with the AD. So if there's an issue with the app or we've taken it off, then the access token is going to get denied. Discovery for SharePoint APIs is more, you need the discovery service because there's a tenant specific URL. For Exchange, for Office 365, it's actually fairly simple. It's outlook.office365.com/API. So that's the single endpoint, no matter where worldwide you deploy on Office 365. Today for Exchange on-prem and hybrid, we have Auto Discover, which I think hopefully all of you are familiar with. What we are working on is figuring out what changes we make to Auto Discover to make it easy to consume using a RESTful app. Or offer a REST API endpoint to basically provide the same level of information. Because today the Auto Discover response, especially the XML endpoint, returns a lot of information for historical reasons because Outlook has required those settings. The REST API, REST API based app needs a lot less. It just really needs only the endpoint. So we could significantly simplify the Auto Discover process. Similar to Exchange Web Services. Actually, I should have taken a show of hands. How many of you are familiar with Exchange Web Services here? Okay, so half. So that's our SOAP API, legacy SOAP API. Just like it publishes its schema using a WSDL, all these, the OData-based REST APIs publish something called a metadata, and it's the same use. Basically, it has a rich description of the schema, and you can use it to generate proxies. And we have made an open source tool available, the developer division folks, called Viper. It's in GitHub, which if you don't find a client library we offer for whatever programming language you're using, you can actually use this open source tool, point it at the metadata and generate your own library. So it's fairly powerful. And in any case, for a lot of these, for quite a few runtimes, we offer very rich tooling, .NET of course, and in fact they've done a really great job of integrating this into Visual Studio, because one of the hardest parts, or one of the most cumbersome aspects today of developing these apps is registering it in Azure Active Directory. Now we're working to simplify it, but the nice thing if you're using Visual Studio is it's actually built into it. So you download a sample, we have these code samples, you can just download that, and there's if you add a connected service for Office 365, as long as you have an Office 365 account, it takes care of the registration for you behind the scenes. So that's really, it becomes very helpful. We also have Android SDK and an iOS SDK, and we're working on more right now. Here's a few partners who are already either developing an app or have already shipped. They come from all different verticals, and the general feedback we've gotten from them is I think they found it fairly easy to use. Some of them have used other REST APIs available in the industry, and I think it was very easy for them to ramp up and quickly ship what they were doing. And most of the time the asks I get is not so much about how do I use the API, it's more about do you have feature X or feature Y available, and that's really what we're focused on our side, trying to make sure that it's as rich as possible to realize all scenarios. So with that, let's go into mail calendar contacts. So as I said, first some basics. The endpoints, there are two endpoints which are available today. One is for Office 365 worldwide, and for China we run a dedicated Office 365 instance which is completely isolated. And for that there's a separate endpoint. And the auth, like I said, the different types of OAuth flows. So OpenID Connect is basically industry standard, the way an app can achieve single sign-on and get basic user profile information. So for example, it can display the user's name. And the OAuth flows we support for interactive apps, we support for background service or daemon apps. The service or daemon apps, because they have access to any mailbox in the organization, and admin has to grant consent for it, but these can be used sometimes for sync jobs or background processing. Also other flows which are required mainly for web applications. And in terms of the path, so like I said, you have the path, you have a /API, and then after that there's a version, and then for users, because Exchange is really a user partition store, we got all these mailboxes, that's the unit of partition for the API as well. So you have to indicate which mailbox you're accessing. And one way to indicate it is user / the person's SMTP address. And we give you a shortcut, because most of the time it's the authenticated user accessing his or her own mailbox. You can use me to do that. Versioning. So versioning is built in and it's explicitly mentioned. So it is a required parameter. There was a lot of debate in our teams as to should we make it required, should we make it optional, should we make it inferred. And you know, when you go back and look at it, when you don't if you require it, you might as well make it clear. So that's why you put it in the path. And in the past, otherwise you run into quirks. And I'll give you an example. With the Exchange Web Services, we have the SOAP API, and then we have a .NET API, which is used by a lot of people to program. If you use the SOAP API, if you don't mention a version, it assumes the oldest possible version. And this was done because on premises, if you're upgrading Exchange, you don't want to suddenly, and if an app you have is depending on the old schema, you don't want to break the app because it didn't mention a version. But the .NET Managed API, if you don't mention a version, assumes it's the latest version. So right there, right, it becomes very confusing. So in this case, it's explicit, and usually it's a V, like a 1.0 or a 2.0 version. Today we have one production version, V1.0. This was GA'd last October, and we have a public preview version. Now with the production version, our guarantee is that we won't make any breaking changes, which means that we may add parameters, but those parameters are not required, they're optional, and they can be set to null. Collections can be empty. And we are guaranteed, you know, we make sure that the production version, basically there's no breaking changes, so if you point at it, that your app is not going to break, as long as you go through some guidelines which are pointed out. The beta version is where we generally ship our new APIs, especially if it's something, a big feature we have rolled out, and we put it in there for up to 3 months, and we solicit feedback from everyone on ease of use or if there's any changes. And so in the public preview case, we reserve the right to make breaking changes if necessary. We try to avoid it, but sometimes you have to clean up the API. And then we get it ready for production. And production, on our side, it's a fairly simple change. It just means figure out the right namespace for it. If there's no breaking changes, it might just end up in V1.0. If not, we would create a new version. So that's the goal. So with mail, the permissions, for mail we offer is read plus write and send. And generally it's very common to do read or read write. The reason send was separated out for messages is sometimes people use a third-party software once they've composed a message to the customers or a large market, right? They don't want, you know, they don't want that app to have access to their mail, but they don't want that app to be able to send, or that service to be able to send mail on their behalf. So that's where you would use the send. The inverse case is often people are okay with something fetching your mail and analyzing and coming back with interesting metrics, but they don't ever want some bug or some issue to cause that app to send mails on their behalf, because it's a very personal kind of invasion of privacy. So that's where we've separated the two permissions. In terms of entities, we have folders, messages, attachments, and you can do create, read, update, delete. We give you a lot of custom actions. For example, with reply, you can reply all. You can just create a reply, which really means you composed a reply and saved it in draft. So later, if you want to go do more processing, like add an attachment and send it, you can do that. And all of this, just like we did for Exchange Web Services, we've tried to model it behind the concepts which Outlook and Outlook Web App expose to a user, so that when the user is going between an app which is using these APIs and Outlook, that everything, like things feel pretty much the same and seamless. And that was one piece which worked really well for Exchange Web Services as well. So if you look at the URL, you've got an inbox, you've got messages. Messages is a collection, and those are contained in a folder. And you've got a way to send. Send is just an action. You just say send mail. And so those are some of the things. Calendar. Calendar is actually a very popular set of APIs in Exchange Web Services too, because two things really scare, scare or complicate things for developers or people just trying to build apps. One is the recurrences. You know, trying to expand recurrences, dealing with exceptions is a pain, and the second is time zone. And so what we've done is, with the calendar APIs, we've tried to take care of both of them. I think recurrence expansion is completely handled by us. You don't even have to deal with it. So for example, if you can have calendar groups, you can have a default calendar. We expose events, which are just, if you want to deal with the complexity, you're familiar with it, you can just ask for events, which means you get all the series masters for recurring series, and you get the individual meetings as well. But if you don't want to deal with it, you can ask for something called a calendar view. So let's say you have an app and you just want to paint a week or a month's worth, set of meetings for the user. You can ask for calendar view and say, here's the start date time, here's the end date time. And we expand everything on the service side and just return you a set of meetings you can just render with whatever properties you requested. So significantly simpler. And in fact, we just added sync capability for that calendar view. So I'll explain a little bit about that. And of course, attachments, I think, self-explanatory. And here are some examples. Also, you will see some of these parameters show up which start with $. I'll actually walk through some of them when I play with the APIs. These are operators OData provides and to do different things like get me the top 5, paging, or filtering, etc. So with calendar sync, there's a few things that, sync is never simple. We try to make it as simple as possible, but there's still a few things to keep in mind. So the way you do sync is when you call calendar view, you just add this one header called OData track changes, and that tells the service you're asking me for a view, but you're asking also for a watermark or a link you can play back later and get incremental changes. So when you do the first time sync, we will return a page with what's called a delta link, and that means that's an incremental link, but you have to keep going. There's one quirk there for internal scale reason we do it that way, but as you keep navigating, you can keep fetching the link and you'll get more and more pages, but at the end you will get a final delta link, and that you have to save. That is basically a URL, and so when you decide that you want to go sync again, you just have to go to that URL which we returned you, and then we will return you the incremental changes and also send you a new delta link which you can save again. So that's the goal. Now, one of the things we know is that apps, today when I said calendar view, I said all of May. Like maybe I maintain a rolling 4-week window. So I say for these 4 weeks, every time you go back and do a sync, we do allow you to adjust the delta link to keep shifting the time so that you can keep like shifting to whatever window you're rendering for the user. Some things to keep in mind. Outside of changing the date range, if you change anything in the delta link, and it's invalid, the service assumes you're asking for a full sync and will just send you everything back. So be very careful about touching anything else. 2, for simplicity, what we've done is, even if a single property is changed, we just return the entire event back. I think you can filter it using an operator called select. But this way, if you keep the entire event on your side, you can just swap it out. We don't try to guess which properties you're interested in unless you explicitly mention in select. And meeting series response is slightly different. When you do calendar view, you never get any of the series masters, which is the one event which has all the series info. We expand it. In the case of sync, we return the series master as well. Today, in the way Outlook and Outlook Web App implement, they apparently use this, and that's why we kept the same API. But this is one piece which you're going to watch and see, are people confused by the fact that the series master is there? If it is, then we might, in the next version, we might actually take it out. But right now, it's there. And contacts is, again, I'm just going to breeze through it. You got contact folders and contacts. One thing, the key thing to remember with contacts is these are contacts in your mailbox. If you're looking to browse the GAL, then you need to go to this unified graph API we'll talk about, because to access the GAL, you really have to go effectively against information in Azure Active Directory. But the contacts gives you personal contacts, and we're working with them to, I guess, offer a single API so that, for example, if you want to search for people and they could be in your contacts, they could be in the GAL for you to give you, that result set. So with that, I'm going to switch over and show you a few of these queries. Okay. Is the size of the text okay? Can people read it? Great. So what I'm going to first, just to kind of orient you, there is this user, this is like a test mailbox with some fake data, and Sarah Davis, that's the name of the user. So we're going to be doing all our requests, REST API requests, against this person's mailbox. So really the information reflected in those in the responses is what you're seeing here. So you can see that she has an inbox. She has a bunch of emails, and then she also has some meetings in her calendar. So let's go back to, and the way I'm going to demonstrate you, right, how to use these APIs. This is just a third-party tool, and what all we have done is, in the interest of time, we like entered a whole bunch of REST API requests, because they're just URLs, right, with a couple of headers. And I'm going to run through them and give you a sense of what the response looks like. And the reason we're doing it this way rather than showing you an app is then it's very hard for you to understand what kind of data does it return and what is the information you have to really play with. At the end, Sri will demo an app which is actually built on top of it, but even that is available in GitHub, so it's something you can actually take and play. So the first thing I mentioned was schema, right? And so, actually before I talk about schema, so you can see that the URL we go against is outlook.office365.com. So this is in production. We have already authenticated here. I don't know if the access token is expired or not, but at some point it will, because the access token is only for an hour. And at that point you will see how we authenticate and authorize. So I'm going to just go ahead and try one query to see if the token is still valid. So I'm just going to enter the query here, and when I hit send, it's just working to send out the request. Okay, it came back. What you see on the left hand side is the exact request it sent out. So you can see in this case it asked for API/v1.0/metadata. So it's asking for the schema for the APIs and the data model exposed by v1.0. If you swap the v1.0 with beta, you get the beta data model. It also has an authorization. This is the OAuth piece. So you see this long string. That is an OAuth token. So if there is a site called, let's see. Okay. If you enter this here, you can see what the token contains, a whole bunch of information. And this token was issued by Azure Active Directory to the app, and the app is sent it to the service. So you can see, for example, that this information, this token gives the app the permission to go access Sarah's mailbox, and it has a whole bunch of permissions associated with it. So you can see that calendar read write, contacts read write, mail read write, mail send. I think the full access is there because we asked for the permission by mistake. So when the request comes to Exchange for any query will validate against the token to say, do you have required permissions, and let the thing through. Hey Sri, how am I doing on time? Do you know this time? Okay. So that was the simplest request, just getting the metadata. And if you look at the query, right? So we return very rich information. All the properties, complex types, entities, collections, everything is returned. And here's some information too which you should keep in mind when you work with the REST API. Especially in the case of failures, you should log all these headers, because these, if you were to approach us with a problem, then the first thing we ask for is this set of headers, because they tell us a request ID. There's a request ID. It also tells us what servers actually process the request at that point of time. What process we thought what server we thought was supposed to process the server, just to make sure there's no routing issues. And so using that set of information, then we can very quickly debug or help you debug your issues. So that was about getting the schema. So let's try to get a user. All I'm trying to do is get some basic information with the user. Now these are the properties for the user which are stored in Exchange. So not all the properties in AAD. And you can see, I'm just going to go scroll past those headers, but we get some very basic links. For example, here's a name, display name, alias, and their mailbox GUID. And then one way to get more detailed information for all the links we expose for them is, I'm going to say format equals application JSON, and I want full metadata. And if you were to do that, you get a much more verbose response, which is you get a set of collections. You can see there are links to, there's a URL provided for you to get to the messages collection, calendars, and tons of other properties. So this is an easy way for you to that's another easy way for you to query and get a set of information. What information is there which I can access for the user? You can also get a user by SMTP. I'll skip past the photo. I think Sri will show you folks that later. You can get folders. For example, you can say, hey, I want inbox folder. And then, so when you look at this point, all I've gotten is as the folder information. And you can see that the folder is a display name. It has a folder ID. If I want the messages themselves, then what I need to do is ask for inbox messages. So here I'm saying, give me all the messages in inbox. Today, there is no way for you to get a collection of messages across the entire mailbox. We just finished that work. That's still in beta, but pretty soon we'll release that to production. And so if you look at this, I ask for a set of messages. Now, you can see that there's a ton of information being returned for each message, right? It's a collection. And you can see things like categories, date time created, subject, body preview. Now, for easy discoverability, again, because often people don't want to go read the docs completely and come back, we are returning all properties. But when you start doing the app, you really should take advantage of a operator called select and only fetch the properties you need. Because especially if you're building a app which ultimately, if it's a mobile-based app, number one, it's going to take a long time for the request to get processed because the server is fetching some properties which are probably expensive. And two, you're transferring a lot of bytes over the wire if, for example, you keep asking for the message body, but you don't need it. So something to keep in mind there. So we looked at messages, and the way you get to a specific message is just go to the same messages URL and then you just attach the ID. And then when you hit send, so when you hit send, you can see that you get the individual message itself. And one of the properties, now in this case, I think you can see that, right? I asked for a whole bunch of properties. One of the properties is called a web link. What a web link is, basically it's the link to the OVA URL. This is very handy and I'll tell you why. There's a couple of customers of ours who have already done this for their portals. So some of them have portals in the company where a lot of employees go and either spend time there or that's kind of the central hub for things. And so they might display for convenience the top 5, the latest 5 messages they've gotten. Now, when you click on the message, they don't want to do all the work to mock or mimic the UI of OVA to render the message. Instead, what you can do is you can just chase this link down. So I'm going to go here, and I'm just going to type that link just to show you what renders, and you can see it's a deep link into the specific message. And the nice thing is, in this case, the user is logged in. If the user is not logged in, then they get the authentication prompt. But once they're signed in, they're sent straight there. They don't get lost. And especially if you're using line of business add-ins or everything, they will all work fine. You can do reply all, forward, all these actions work. It's as if you landed in OVA. So that's one feature. And the reason we've done this also is, again, we're trying to make things coherent. So we're trying to tie the UI, which you usually see in Outlook or OVA, to what the APIs give you. If you use some of our partners have add-ins paired up with the service side, which is using REST APIs. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Can you iframe that? Do they block iframes?
Today we do, but we're working to resolve that. So the reason today the reason you don't want to iframe it is if the user is not authenticated, and you logged into, then we have to bring up an authentication prompt, and Azure AD does not let you iframe that authentication prompt. But there's work we're doing to see how we can give you a token, or how the app can send us a token, which is in the URL itself. And at that point, that problem goes away. So then we.
What about a universal web app where it's like inside of the web view? Would that be the same concept? Or?
That's a good question. Maybe I need, I'll sync up with you afterwards to understand how that works. Yeah, that'll be great. Thank you. If, Harvey, if you want to just get his contact info, right, we can follow up with him. Thank you. So, getting back to these requests, right, so that's one convenience feature. Also, so those are messages. You can also, you have these different operators, for example, top. So what happens when you do top is I'm just asking for the top 5 emails. And so what the request looks like, you can see is let's see, it's just saying give me the top 5, right? And you can say top 10, top 15, etc. There's also, so let's see, and then really useful, something for you to keep in mind is order by. So if you want to change the way things are ordered, so in this case I'm asking for order by date time received and say give me in the descending order. So when you do that, you'll be able to see that, right, it just starts with the latest email first. So this, this was just resent. Similarly, there's a whole bunch of operators like select. So let's try select. When you do select, Select is basically saying exactly which properties you need. So let's assume that you're composing some kind of a list view where you don't want to render all the details of the message, you just similar to the Outlook list view. So select is something which comes in really handy. So in this case, you've said, hey, I only want to select parent folder ID, date time received, subject, a few things which usually are rendered in that list view in Outlook in the middle pane. And if you basically, so let's say that if you wanted to finally compose the complete list view, here's what this would look like. So at this point, I'm combining all these different operators I showed you, the one for top, that's getting the top 5 or top 15, the one for order by to control the, what order and what parameter it's sorted by, etc. So when you do this, you can see, so I just hit send. You can ignore this query. So you can see that it's just quickly sent you all the properties you asked for, but only the ones you asked for. And so that's really convenient and fast. Go ahead.
Can you, say, display the first 5 lines of the body?
That's a great question. No, today there are 3 types of things we give you, and that's really what's available. You can ask for the entire body, which of course is expensive. You can ask for a body preview. I don't think the body preview's first 5 lines is something smaller. We also let you retrieve something called unique body. Unique body is used by Outlook web app, for example, when it renders a conversation on the right-hand pane, and you want to you want to basically slice apart the email and make it look like individual pieces, although the latest email, for example, has all the other parts of the conversation, right? So we haven't yet gotten this, but that's something we can talk about, right? What your specific need is.
These are all about sort of user actions of reading the inbox, but are there APIs or coming for acting on the mailbox itself?
There are. In fact, they're available today, so I'll show some of them.
Litigation hold or something like that?
Litigation hold. So that's a great question. So number one, we do allow write actions, but in terms of administrative actions on the mailbox, there's a whole set of admin APIs for Office 365 which were launched at the RSA conference, which was like a few weeks ago. I don't know if litigation hold was specifically covered in there, but the goal of that, we work very closely with that team, is to actually expose all the things you can do using PowerShell, pretty much using a REST API.
What was that called?
It's called Office 365 admin APIs. And so if RSA, if I get your contact information, I can send you pointers to documentation, you can take a look at it. So I think I showed you a little bit of, the message functionality. So let's say you wanted to send, right? Let's try sending a message. So what I have here is I've already pre-composed some text, and this email is being sent out as Sarah. So in this case, I need the send privilege. And notice that all these other operations I did was using a get, but since this is something where I'm sending a body and the service is making a change, I sent a post. You get a 202, which means it succeeded. So let's go over to the mailbox and look at the sent items. And you can see that this is the email we just sent. So this is the email. Oh, 1 second. Oh yes, that is the email, sorry. I think this user is in Pacific time zone, so I have to do the math. Whatever that math is. So going back to the types of things you can do. So we talked a lot about messages. Now let's look a little bit about sends. So one of the things I showed you, for example, getting events from the default calendar. Again, we expose a rich set of properties, and all of these would be useful. That includes time zone, what kind of event it is. You can look at start, end, times, locations. So this is an ask we've gotten, especially from people who make mobile apps, including our own internal apps we've acquired recently, where when you're on a phone and you want to set up a calendar, they often want to add GPS coordinates or something, so we've added support for that. And you get the response status. And once again, for these also, we expose the web link. So you actually can you can again use the deep link functionality to take the user to the calendar. Now that was the default calendar, but we exposed you collections of multiple calendars of users of multiple calendars, so you're able to navigate to the exact calendar and get events from there. And then get calendar view, which is what completely hides the complexity of recurrences, etc. So I'm going to show you that. So if you look at this, right? So basically it's calendar view, start date, end date, and that's really it. You can use select again to only get the properties you want. And what we end up doing is we return all the events. And for example, you can see also, whether the event has attachments or not. You can look at the type of event and it returns you the entire set, so you can just render it very easily. That calendar view is expanding your entire calendar, but sometimes maybe you want to get an expansion for a specific series. We support that as well. So if you look at this, there's a specific first meeting series I'm going to fetch. So I'm just going to go fetch this event. And what you see here is it's got all these recurrence information, right? So clearly it's a recurring event. Now what I can do is I can expand that specific meeting series. So I say get instances, and then I'm just going to add a few more parameters to it. And there, you can expand the individual series itself. And you can see that now each of the meeting types returned as an occurrence or an exception. Contacts, you can get default contacts very easily. It's very simple. Just get the top 5 contacts. And you will notice that all these fields we have are basically the same fields which show up in Outlook. And so that way, again, this is one place where I found developers are really particular that those fields are named or named exactly like the way the Outlook renders it, because otherwise they get a lot of questions from their users. So I think that was a quick view. So now I'm going to switch back to the PowerPoint. So there's a whole ton of reference queries I have there, so that you can easily use them. And now let's move to unified groups, which I talked about. So Office Groups itself is something which has properties from multiple workloads, right? Outlook, the information is stored all across the place, but it's one feature mastered in Azure Active Directory. There's a whole bunch of deep dives. I don't know how many of you had a chance to attend a unified groups session. Okay, some of you. For the rest of you, there are some links in the reference which I would really, it'd be great for you guys to check out. It's a great feature. And because a group, you inherently always interact with multiple workloads. It is coming through a unified endpoint called graph.microsoft.com. And that means that the developer doesn't have to worry about where this data is stored. For example, if you want to turn on a certain flag for the group or for the user subscription to the group, you don't have to worry about it. So it has its own set of permissions. There's a whole bunch of operations. Some of them are very similar, and some take into account the constraints of the groups app. And again, one key thing in the case of groups, we allow the app to go enumerate the list of groups available in the organization. And just like we provide a shortcut called me for users, we give you a shortcut called my organization, or you can specify the domain itself. So we have management, conversations, calendar, files, a pretty rich functionality. And again, there's a whole set of queries I have in there. Now, so quickly, just to show you what groups look like. Again, very similar. So this is a sample user in our pre-production. This build is, I think, 80% deployed, and you can see they have 2 groups. And once again, and this is an application. Somebody wrote the single-page application using JavaScript, AngularJS. I showed you all these queries, right? These people are basically using the same types of queries running as unified endpoint. And you can see that in this case, I can go to my groups, And it's calling to, it's calling the endpoint to go fetch groups. All of the logic in this case is running on the inside the web app itself, inside the browser. So that's the cool part with the AngularJS framework. And we have done some work, which Sri will touch on, to enable these types of apps to make calls to us. So you can see that there are 2 groups available. And so once I fetch this, then it gives you a way to access these events. And so I can go access these. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sri.
Hello. Thanks, Venkat, and good evening, everybody. So Venkat was talking about the API features we have and touched upon the Groups API. I'm going to show you more awesome features we added in the last couple of months. So let's go ahead. First one is the webhooks or push notifications. What this really is it allows any app to get notifications from our service when anything in the mailbox has changed, whether new things have been added or updated or deleted. So it eliminates the need for the app to keep polling the service and subscribe to notifications. So today we have support for messages, events, contacts, and groups. And in groups we have support for conversations, threads, and events. And the way you subscribe is first you go to the subscriptions endpoint and then you say which URL you want to subscribe to notifications to. That can be me/inbox messages, and then you also specify what you want to be notified on, whether it's anything has been created or updated or deleted. So let me show you a quick demo of how this works.
You want me to switch?
Yeah, switch. So this is just a simple app that's going to intercept all the notifications that notification messages and everything that I'm subscribing to. So let me go back to Apigee, which Venkat was looking at earlier. Here I'm going to say, let's subscribe to notifications, send. Okay. So let's look a little bit, let's look at the request and the response. So here we have OData type of push subscription. Right now we have only one type, but in the future we are going to add more like streaming. So the reason I'm highlighting this is it's been designed such that we can add more types in the future. And then the resource URL we are subscribing to is me folders inbox messages. And we have the callback URL, which right now I've given the callback URL of the app that I'm going to look at. And the response here, you can see again the resource URL, the callback URL, and then we have something called the expiration time. This is the time that the subscription is valid for. It's usually valid for 72 hours or 3 days. And anytime you get any notification from the service, it's going to include this expiration time. So your app can know when your subscription is going to expire, and then you can renew the subscription. If by any chance you miss renew, then you have to create another subscription for the same resource. So now let's go back to our app, and let me refresh. And here you can see that it actually received the notification response that now we are subscribed to notifications on that folder.
One of the things we found very useful is as soon as the app subscribes, we send it one ping, just so we know that it knows that the loop was completed and the endpoint, everything is up, right? So
now Venkat is going to send an email to Sarah. So we can see that we'll get a notification here that there's a new email. So let's see. Did you send it?
Outlook is sending.
Okay. Anyways, once we get it, we'll see it. But one thing I want to say is there is notifications and then there's sync. With every notification, we also send you a number of sequence number. So with that you can say, with that you can tell if you've actually missed any notifications on the network or something. So if you get 1 and then you get 3, then you can say, okay, there's some notification in between that is lost. So there is that risk of, there can be no guarantee that you'll get everything that's sent.
You want to take a look at the hook?
So now here you have the mail from Venkat. Let's go back to the app, and if you refresh it, it says, yeah, you got a new message, and we actually give you the sequence number here, expiration time, and the subscription ID. This is useful because later when you want to, you can go query the service for the subscription ID and get the details. And we also give you the actual OData ID of the message itself. So if necessary, you can go and take that ID and plug it in your app or do whatever you want to with it.
Go ahead.
This is for an individual user. Can you do it also for, say, an organization or a tenant?
You can. You need to use one of the other flows. What we're using is implicit auth, which is for a single user interacting with the web app for the demo purposes. But we have a service, we allow a service account, for example, to come as an app itself. And when it subscribes, it can subscribe to changes to folders in any user's mailbox in the organization. And it just has to have an endpoint available where you post back. So.
Okay, so let's move on.
Okay.
Switch. Cool. So we did the demo. Now we'll look at some other features we've added. First one is time zone. Venkat touched a little bit upon this when he was doing his demos. The story behind this is we originally had start and end time zone, but a lot of you were asking for start and end time, but a lot of you were asking for time zone support, and now we've added it in the V1. But it's a little bit funky because since we didn't want to break existing app and wanted to be backwards compatible, we added start time zone and end time zone as additional properties which are optional, and we had to leave the start and end times as date time offsets. So when you send a request to create an event, you would have to specify the start time and end time as offsets which match the time zone, and also specify the time zone along with it. So maybe with an example it'll be a little bit clearer. The other thing to keep in mind with time zone is all-day events. So say for example you have an all-day event like your birthday, it's always midnight to midnight, irrespective of which time zone you are in. So when you query us, we send when you create that all-day event, you have to send the midnight to midnight time in UTC along with the time zone, say Central Standard Time or Pacific Standard Time.
Yeah, one of the challenges with all-day events is sometimes people put things like birthday. So whether you're here in Chicago this week or you're in Paris next week, the thing has to start at 12 and end at 12. So usually with Outlook, I think what happens is the client says, I'm in this time zone, and the server formats it for the time zone and sends it back. It's stored on the service as 12 to 12. In this case, because we've added time zone after the fact, in V1, the client is going to get back something in UTC because it didn't provide a time zone to begin with, and we can't make that a parameter required. But when it comes back, it can do the math and correct it to render correctly. But in the next version, we're going to change because then we can make a breaking change and require the client to provide a time zone when fetching an all-day event, or fetching events in general.
So the next thing is search. So
do you want me to switch?
Yeah. So Venkat demoed the filter capability earlier, but filter is very restrictive in the sense that you cannot filter parameters like contains or starts with. So we have now added the search feature. So you can do full text search with it. I'm going to do a little bit small demo. So I'm going to get messages and search for tailspin. So the query format is very simple. Whatever you want, you go to the messages and then say $search equal to the search term. Let's hit send. Now you're going to see a list of messages from Sarah's mailbox which have the term tailspin in it. So you can see this here, and the mailbox has multiple messages with this search term. I'm going to also show you one other thing. So we also allow.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Is it possible to search in specific categories like from?
In fact, yeah, that's what she's going to show.
Yeah. So what I have here is search equal to from Garth and select datetime received and from. So this is going to Sarah's mailbox and it's going to search for messages that are received from a user called Garth. So you can see that it is from Garth. So this query is actually going to, it's going to retrieve all messages from Garth's phone. Okay. Then let's go ahead and look at the next feature, which is...
Yeah, one thing I did want to mention with search is, with search really what we're doing is, with indexing is restrictive, filter is restrictive because we go against the Exchange store and we only allow you to search what's indexed and efficient to retrieve. Otherwise, it's either going to be efficient, too expensive for the service and too slow for your app. Now with search, it's actually going against the fast search engine. So fast search engine is indexing the same stuff, so it's way faster and optimized for full text search, and that lets you get a much better experience and much more flexible. And so we work very closely with our team within Exchange, some of whom are here, to realize that capability.
Oh, another thing I have to mention is search is right now available only for messages, but we are working to add it for calendar and contacts also, so it will be there in the near future.
Right.
So let me show you a demo of the user photo. Here it is. So this is actually going to fetch the photo that is stored in the mailbox. And if there is no photo stored in the mailbox for that user, then it's going to go to the Active Directory and fetch the photo from there. So what we do is when somebody uploads a photo to Exchange mailbox, we actually store different versions of it based on resolution. So we split it up into multiple versions, and you can see multiple versions of the photo here. So let me show you. If I go to, let's say, Sarah's mailbox and then say, so I can actually get the actual photo by saying user photo / $value. We don't give it when you query for just user photo, we just give you all the other details, the metadata associated with the photo, because we don't want to send all these bytes. But when you query for $value, you can actually see Sarah's photo here. And as I said earlier, we have multiple versions. So you can actually say user photos / 48 cross 48 $value, and that will give you a much smaller resolution of the photo. But this 48 cross 48 is not an arbitrary number. It's one of the resolutions that's already stored in the mailbox. So you can actually query for this, and if you query for user photos, you'll get a list of all the resolutions that are available for you to use in your app. Yeah. So here you can see it's 48, 48, then there's 64 cross 64.
Yeah, and we also have ETAG support, so you don't have to fetch the picture every time.
Yeah.
You can get the metadata, look at the ETAG, and only if the picture is changed. I mean, people don't change the picture all the time, well, at least at work. Maybe not at Facebook, but so.
Yeah, okay. So the next thing we want to talk about is course support. So you saw the single page app earlier written by one of our colleagues, Matthias. That app is actually using course support. So single page apps are becoming very popular these days, and what it means is the app is running in a browser in a different domain, and they want to access our service, which is in a different domain. Usually the browser does not allow such calls, but since we have implemented this support on our server side, the browser can actually talk to us and ask, hey, do you let us do cross-domain calls? And then we say yes, and then they can make the call. But we require that the auth token be sent with the call so that we know that it's a safe app. And when the app is registering in Azure Active Directory, we actually give them the authentication token, so we know that only that app has access to that token. Yeah.
Okay, switch back to the deck.
So next. Okay.
No, did this.
So next I'm going to talk about some documents and developer resources that you have, so you can go back and get started with building your app easily. The last 2 weeks ago, we launched this site called dev.outlook.com. It's a one-stop shop for you to go look up anything that's related to Outlook or Exchange development. So on the left side there, you can see that it connect to Outlook service that is related to all the REST APIs you can use to build apps. And on the right side is information related to building mail add-ins for Outlook. And we also have very cool getting started tutorials. So I can actually demo that, I mean, show it to you right here.
There's both a sandbox and tutorials, but yeah, I'll switch. Yeah.
So let's go to dev.outlook.com. You scroll down, and you have links to all the references, the concept topics, everything right here. So you don't have to go to multiple places to find everything. You can just come here. Then you also have a link to our blog, where you can get information on new features, articles on how you can use our features like time zone, search. Then we have links to Stack Overflow code samples. Let's go to Get Started. So when you land on Get Started, the first thing we want you to do is try out this OAuth sandbox. This is a sandbox where you can play with it. You can authorize using a test account or your own account. So let me do it with one of the accounts that I have.
So one of the reasons we started this is we actually have an excellent developer site at dev.office.com, which gives you a very good view of all up Office development. You take a look at it. But sometimes people want to understand all up Office, like you're an architect, they're trying to figure out, okay, what do we want to do with extensibility in general with Office servers? Sometimes somebody has a specific idea. I think I can generate reminders much better than what Outlook does. And so they have some specific need, and they go to office.com, there's so much information, and then we don't make it easy. We got Exchange Online, on-prem, Office 365, Outlook.com, a few more terms I can't even recall. And so there's confusion. So we said, let's make it easy for them, right? Just come here, and then we'll tell you how to write API, how to use the APIs, how to write add-ins, and then hopefully you can get started quickly, and that's the goal.
So I logged in, and now you can see the app is asking me for consent. So the app is going to access my calendar, contacts, mail. So I'm going to accept. Now you go back to the OAuth sandbox. So this we use something called the
Code flow,
where the app is going to get an authorization code, and then the app can use that authorization code to get access and refresh tokens, and then they can use the access token to get fetch data from the mailbox. So I have the authorization code here. I'm going to do get tokens. You can actually see in the request response what goes over the wire when this auth workflow happens. Then we have some pre-canned queries here. You can select one of them and hit send, and you will see the result below. So we also have capability to edit this query. So instead of 10 messages, if I want to see just one message, I can say one and then hit send again. So this is the previous query which came back. I can hit send again. So once you can see, like, you can do a lot of things with this sandbox. Once you're done playing with it, come back to the Outlook Dev Center and pick one of the tutorials we have on the left. So let's see, like the .NET one. So this is a step-by-step tutorial of how you can write your very first app, and it's going to be a very simple app.
And our goal is start to finish within half an hour. You have something working,
yeah.
And that's the goal. And there's a repository. It's already in GitHub,
yeah.
So you can also go just straight to it and play with it.
Yeah, so there's a link to the GitHub repository where this starter project is available, but I encourage all of you to actually go through all these steps so you understand how this flow works, and you'll be able to then do stuff on your own. Yeah, so now I actually have this code downloaded in Visual Studio, and I'm going to show you one small thing. So if you go to this add connected service, and I'm already connected and I have permissions set. So what happens when you do this is automatically going to register your app in Azure AD and assign all the permissions and everything correctly.
Makes for a much easier experience. We are working to simplify the app registration experience, but for now, if you're using Visual Studio, you're already with a pretty nice, pretty
and it's
easy
also
to
going
use.
to add all the NuGet and references for you. So let's hit F5.
Will that do app registration? Because I found difficulty registering an application that was more of a service account, where you need a certificate and things of that nature. Will that help in that process?
So that's a great point. I think the getting started in this Visual Studio, I think it doesn't have support for that, but we can help you with that. If you're having difficulty with it, the person who did the single page app, he rolled out that feature. We can, we've gotten questions before about it. While we work to make it simpler, we could probably just unblock you offline. So just make sure to give us your contact info.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So this is opening my app. I'm going to log in as Sarah.
Go ahead.
I just tried it right now as she was speaking on one of my tenant apps, and it returns the contact of the particular last name with all the details.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, we're glad you liked it.
Yeah. So at the end of the tutorial, this is what you'll see. You'll be able to have an app where you can user can log in, and then you'll see a list of the top 10 messages in the inbox. So you can see Venkat's message and message from me here, and then you can also do like calendar, and you can see calendar events, contacts. So this displaying like top 10 everywhere.
So it gives you a great starting point to take it, and especially if that auth flow works for you, right? You can start with it and just go.
So Venkat, to mention dev.office.com, I'm going to just show you what you have there. It's you have like a lot of resources over there. If you go to documentation, you can see something called the API sandbox. So this is also a really cool sandbox where you can go play with the queries. It has C# and JavaScript code, which is using our client library. So you can go here and say, okay, give me the sample code for get messages, and then you can run it. This is the sample code for get messages in C#. So we are also working to integrate this API sandbox and OAuth sandbox together, so you'll have one place to go.
Yeah, one important learning for us was when we did these, we tried to make the query simple, because we used to always get the feedback with AWS, oh man, it's so complex. But we went a little too simple. So all these example queries all over the place don't use select. They generally get all the properties. And I'm surprised by how many people have come to me because they just copied the stuff into their app and they're like, oh, why am I taking so many bytes over the wire, and why is it taking time? So once again, I said this a while, but please use select and only get the properties you need, because you can offer a great experience there.
Yep. Okay. I think I'll hand over to Venkat right now.
Yeah. Thanks, Sri. Some best practices: log the headers. We use that to diagnose, so it's really critical you have those. And I think I talked about the optimal app performance. I think that's important. If you see service unavailable, I think this is true for any service, but this is true and for REST APIs too. Use exponential backoff. If you keep trying to hit us, then you might just exhaust the user's quota, and that's going to just cause pain for them. This is another thing I get all the time, right? Okay, I have all these APIs. Which ones do I pick? So let's quickly walk through that. Full featured. EWS is full featured. I think there's a ton of APIs. It's one of the richest surfaces, and that's because we over time a lot of teams within Exchange have added to it. EAS is limited because it was meant for a phone, and also what we found is the phone manufacturers generally, they're not, even if we expose a new feature through EAS, they're not going to add it till all the different providers the user connects to through the phone supports them. So they go for the lowest common denominator, and once we saw this, we stopped adding more and more features there. The REST API today is not as full featured as EWS, but we are investing heavily in it to bring it to parity. Because the feedback we've gotten is EWS is awesome, it's very rich, a lot of people have built really good apps on it, but the ease of programming in today's market, the ease of finding somebody who's familiar with the REST development patterns is it's much easier to find somebody. So we want to make sure that they're not constrained by the fact that REST doesn't have the capabilities which EWS has. So we're adding aggressively. The OAuth support, EWS has OAuth support, REST has, but one nuance there is, although EWS gives you OAuth, which means at least the user is not providing their username and password to the app, the only privilege, the only permission the app can ask is full access. So in that point, you don't get the limited, the protection that they can only do read-only or read-write. With REST, you have all of that available. EWS has really good reach. We're working for REST to get to the same place. So it's available everywhere. With REST, we already have it available in Exchange Online. And hybrid and on-premise coming, we're not going to obviously do anything with 2010, 2007. So if you either have 2010 on-premises, which I know is a pretty large footprint, or if you're developing an app catering to that audience, then for now you have to use EWS, and it'd be hard for us to port all the REST API work back that far. Outlook.com users, the REST API is what we're recommending. I think that's where we'll be investing a lot. The other protocols will work over time, but the reason REST would be best is, especially these consumers are used to, on their phone, the OAuth pattern of, okay, this app is asking me access to my contacts, I say yes, and then they're used to that flow. And so usually if people go try to ship apps which require username, password, or full access, then the drop-off rate they see is pretty big. In terms of modern API ease, the metadata, ease of generating proxies, the ease of use, certainly the feedback we're getting at least is the REST APIs win hands down. And in terms of client SDKs, there's a set of teams at Microsoft who are both developing SDKs, and not only that, we've been asked, and they're taking the infrastructure they use to develop these SDKs, like I said, the open source tool called Viper, and they're putting it in GitHub so that everybody is not gated by the bandwidth available on these teams to generate the SDK. So if somebody wants to generate it against the beta version, or they want to do it for a runtime they care about, then they're welcome to go, both use it and also contribute to it because it's an open source project. And licensing, EAS requires licensing, neither EWS or REST require licensing. So what the bottom line comes down to is, if you're an Exchange 2010 and older, then I think EWS is your best bet for extensibility because it's full featured and it's been running for a while. If you're Exchange Online, then absolutely you should go for REST. If you're Exchange 2016, then we will make REST available. Actually, making the REST APIs available is very easy. The hard part is making OAuth work there, because today the fact that the user consented to the app means that today Azure Active Directory knows both about the user and they know about the app because the app registered with them, so they can store that information. What we have to figure out is, if we make this available to on-premises customers, how do we make sure that it's still very easy for the app to register and for us to have a safe place to store the consent, which the customer is comfortable with and you're comfortable with, but at the same time the app doesn't have to register in a million places, because then they won't register and then our customers don't get the benefit of all these apps available in the marketplace. For Exchange 2013, we're still not, EWS might be an option, but we are considering backporting the REST APIs and lighting up the OAuth support for that as well. So we may end up supporting it, don't know yet. I think we'll know in a few months. We'll be able to provide more clarity on that. Roadmap, tons of new features. Again, our goal is to get EWS, a parity with EWS, so contact pictures of other users in the organization. This is, again, a very popular feature because when you start showing people's pictures in a conversation or any kind of a view, when you have an app on a phone, it makes it so much more personal and lively. Batching is in development, so that's going to come out soon. Custom properties and entities, another very popular feature. So in EWS, apps have extended properties, but here what we've done is, again, in the new Microsoft, right, so we're working closely with the Office Graph guys on providing a REST API which lets you create not just custom properties but also custom entities, and that way for some apps you don't even have to find some other place in Azure or EC2 to store things. You might be able to just store it in Exchange because you keep coming back here. Mail sync and contacts again are coming. Olsen time zone support. This is especially important for people who are not on Windows platform, because for them Olsen is what they're familiar with. FreeBusy is missing, so FreeBusy is going to come soon. Mail tips, delegate scenarios. For some select scenarios we already have delegate working, but we haven't fully rolled it out. And we want to, I think hybrid, Outlook.com, hybrid, Exchange 2016 on-prem, and easy to point discovery. All of these are a roadmap. We're working on it actively, and ultimately the goal is that both you as a customer and the developer has a large market to reach, and the consumer has a large variety of apps to pick from, and so they can pick whatever is best for them. I know all of these sessions are in the past, but I put the links because I know every time you have to pick between sessions, so hopefully these links will help you go look at some of these. They range from level 200, here's like a overview of where Office development is heading. I want to end with what Satya has said publicly. Office 365 is strategic to Microsoft today because of his rate of growth. And for him, the developer platform for Office is strategic to Office 365 success. So there's a lot of high-level support and momentum behind this. So I think there's a pretty large effort. And so this ranges from high-level talks to all the way to low-level, and also a talk from one of my colleagues in ADFS who's also looking at how do we light up the OAuth scenarios for on-premises. So he did a talk as well. And if you're interested in the developer program, we have a free developer tenant. You can check it out. These are marketing slides. That's why they look way, way more polished than the ones we came up with. And you can check out, check out the talks, developer program. And finally, just to close it out, I think we went through the session objectives, why they're important, a deep dive, some best practices, comparison with AWS, and also hopefully give you a sense that there's a lot more coming. So if you're holding back because, okay, I can do a lot more with AWS, that's not an issue. And yep, hopefully you enjoyed the talk.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Thank you.